Okay, so here we are, ready to start DoD2. I think I noted something kind of incorrectly about these cities. What you do is you add up the entirety of what's there, and, or no, Jesus. Let me look at Conquest again. Yeah, the total number of offensives equals or exceeds the value in the red circle in the resource factory box in the home nation. Well, that looks like 1. Yeah. No, that's when the specific. Okay. So where's total conquest? A territory is conquered when all cities, resources, and factories have been conquered, regardless of the number of offensive points gained. So what you have to do is you have to match the biggest factor there. So for example, France looks like it'll only take a 2, not the whatever I was looking at, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, or whatever. It looks like it only requires a 2. And Russia requires the big 20. These values are the interims. Once you hit 4, you've taken their oil. You've taken one of their oil resources. One of them. And any that are in trade are lesser value. So yeah, total conquest requires what? All resources, factories, and cities have been captured. So getting Moscow for 20, well, there's 7 oil fields, so you need 28 to beat them. Likewise with the French, okay, you get their cities for whatever those are worth for 2, but it's going to take 6 to take out all the factories and resources. And the U.S. is pretty much unable to be conquered. 34 looks like our number there, even though you take the major cities. Now, what do the major cities matter for? Not much in Days of Decision itself. They matter if you're allocating what you've conquered in a conversion to a whiff game. That was something. Anyway, going to the sequence of play. First thing we have is no initiative. Now, this is not terribly well explained how that works within the rules, which is to say there's no special case to handle what happens when nobody had any bids in. One way you could read it, perhaps the most strict way, and I don't remember what the second last card is. There's 2 of them in play. One of them is assigned to the dude who's going to get the last official play. One way to read it is, hey, nobody bid, so nobody's allowed to do a damn thing. I don't think that's what's intended, but that would probably be the strictest reading of the rules. The second opportunity to look at it is everybody bid, which isn't as horrible as it sounds because it just means that everybody, nobody loses anything for their bid. Nobody's got any income or anything, though. Do they? Yeah, they do have some cash, and they have the ability to go into debt. So, yeah, that's what I was considering here. What I'm going to do, so look at these, and one of the things that immediately jumped out at me is, what the hell are these black ones for? I know a little black here means I think it can only be played. No, that can't be it. Black somewhere, black here means it can only be played once. Black here matches here, and I think it means it's reliant on someone else to respond, to react in some way in order for it to actually work. So after looking over all the different generic ones, and I'll never remember them all, any more than I'll remember all the ones on here, and all the German ones, there's one thing that's clearly the best, occupying the Rhineland. Now, Germany will no longer be bound by the Locarno Treaty. That's going, we have this, Belgium renounces the French alliance. I don't think that's an effect, unless it's specific, which it is. we have these effects on different nations, which we have to worry about. And we go to the fun with the little counters thing. So I look up, okay, first I'm doing Austria. Now, does this fire off? Yes, because it's white and nobody can stop it. I meet the minimum requirements. French do not now occupy the Rhineland, and initiative's less than the French. I don't want to give the French an opportunity to take this. It has a high cost, or a cost, in U.S. entry, but not as high as, say, gearing up production. One thing notably, you can't disarm while your production multiple is a half. So I have to pump my production up to try to reduce it through disarmament. I don't think that's going to ever happen, but you know, it gives Germany an option to say, whoa, okay, look, you know, we'll cut this down. You can actually do this in the midst of a war. So you could kind of make a war more limited. Let's say you take France out and you don't want to go for Russia. You could kind of try to back away and reduce U.S. entry. That would be an interesting option, perhaps. What does U.S. entry do? How does it work? I've read it and I don't remember it worth a damn. Okay, we don't know. Okay. So the U.S. entry section does not tell you how U.S. entry works. It probably is baked into the U.S. table, so you have to be familiar with all tables. Yep. U.S. entry greater than 10 to declare war. Wow. Well, that's pretty easy. Jesus. Is that right? U.S. and MP, military points, minus U.S. entry, I think, minus U.S. entry greater than 10, minor allied unit in it less than minors allied MP, what the fuck? In it sounds like initiative less than the minor allied. Okay, so I think this is for going to war with a minor. No, looks like it can be anything. Good God. Well, I think we got to think a little bit here, because if the U.S. can enter the war at what? What is it? Military points minus U.S. entry. Well, there is no U.S. entry, is there? What the hell? Okay, so here, you declare war on a major power if you have a net U.S. entry of plus 60 or more against that major power. But you can declare war on a minor if it's allied to a major power. Well, that and that I think automatically doesn't work that way. I seem to remember if you declare war on a minor, you're actually having to declare that's allied. You have to declare on the major. If I can find that, well, I can't find the declaration of war section. Yeah, this whole game is going to be like this. And this is why I'm doing it, and I'm going to have to do the same with WIF too. And why I say this is just an exploratory. This is not your normal video, because yes, I know I do this in a lot of them, but man, I feel like I'm going to be spending 90 to 95% of these playthroughs trying to figure out what the fuck the rules actually mean. So you can declare war on a minor country that's allied to a major power. But not one that's been already associated. Associated is basically bringing one into the war, or that's joined the side, which is IPO 5, which we look over here. you have to be at war to do this, but you're bringing the minor into play in that war. So I can declare war on a minor that's, say, allied to an enemy power. I can't just do a land grab, though, with the U.S. More than that, I'm not allowed to declare war without a casus belli, because I'm a democracy. That I don't think is listed here. But I believe all the capitalist powers are limited to not being able to declare war without a casus belli by the rule. So I'm not going to be jumping into wars here with the U.S. And the personal war entry value that limits me for declaring war on Germany, we did discover that's 60 or more to declare war against a major power that I have to accumulate against it. So the 4 for taking Rhineland doesn't seem like a big deal. So that's what we're going to trigger. And I believe, but I'm not sure, that it takes place immediately. Okay. So the first thing we do is we have to pay for this. Now this has a cost of 3 Reichmark. Luckily we have money, so we're not going into debt. We're still a creditor nation. Or a credited nation. And then we look through these. So Austria. Austria does not like this. So I get a -1 on Austria. So I gotta find Austria, who's sitting over here. Italy has points on Austria. I don't. And then I grab a 1-point counter, which are very hard with these slickery counters. Find the -1 side and put it under Austria. And that means Austria is 1 opposed to me for this. I'm going to do that with all of the rest of these. Then I mark down the addition to U.S. entry, which is not on a per nation basis here, yet the rules seem to indicate that it's on a per nation basis. So I'm not quite sure what to do about that. I'll have to try to find whether there's something that I'm missing about that. But I wouldn't be shocked if the player aid doesn't really conform with the rules. And this does seem to be kind of a half-assed job to get it out the door before, based on its production schedule. And then I get the effects of this, which is I can enter the Rhineland with my military, I can put my reinforcements there. I get the Cologne factory and a resource from the Rhineland. 1 additional resource. So that gives me not everything I would get there. Uh-oh, this doesn't work. There's the Cologne factory. I have that. An additional resource. I'm at 2 to begin with. That puts me all the way to 3, so now I find the 3. In a sense, I'm just going to remove these markers. That's now part of Germany as far as I'm concerned. I think that's a safe thing to do. And there are so many little damn counters. But I do have to be careful to note these and say, hey, that is fully part of Germany now. The numbers that were there for a different, to indicate that I didn't have it all. And I remove any French alliance marker under Belgium. So now we find Belgium, and there is a French alliance marker. I did things wrong. This is for alliance markers. This is where we put the Austrian political influence. Now, what's funny is the Austrian political influence marker affects their movement on here. The alliances is something different. That's levels of alliance and how much they're able to cooperate if they're brought into war, etc. And whether or not there's a casus belli. Okay, so I'm going to allocate the rest of the points that I get here, including the U.S. entry and the points on the different nations. And you can see Belgium loves that I take the Rhineland. Ooh. Well, they fear me. Indeed, in the rules, it does seem to indicate that U.S. entry is on a per-nation basis. So I'm recording it over here along with the Rhineland being occupied. I'm also going to, I don't know if there's anything much I need to do here otherwise in these sheets to record there. And I'm recording that I have a 4 versus Germany there just because I probably should have it in multiple places to make it harder to maintain. All right. The next thing is we have to activate a minor country of our choice. Now, since I've got a big bonus on Belgium right now, I'm going to activate them, I think. Let's see what happens when we do. Let's see if we can find the rules for that. Activating minor. Neutral zone is going to cost 2 points to enter each space in. It costs 1 point to enter into areas of the same ideology. Well, I'm the only person with any effect, and if I do any of my 1 point things, they don't move it towards me. This is closer, so I'm going to move here. It would cost me 3 to move here because this is within the opposing ideology, so it's actually cheaper to pull them out of the ideology. And that clears that 3-point Belgian advantage that I have. So I mean, just dislodging them out of there was kind of a big deal. I don't expect any of these actions to have a huge effect on the the hex, the status display. And I mean, I think I could have picked one that I didn't have. Now it has to have a political marker, and it has to have a control marker in its country. So political marker is the little marker on the map. Control marker is what I just fired off. It didn't have to be mine. Now note that these markers, which are also in the country, are in the flag box, and they're different. They indicate an alliance of some level. I don't know if it's just a trade agreement. They allow they indicate an alliance at level 1 treaty. Now, what is a level? What are the different levels of treaties? Oh, let's see where that's here. Is that in the treaty section? And I have to also worry about government elections. Each nation has its own requirement of when to fire off an election by. And if I don't do that, I suffer an automatic penalty. But if I don't remember that I should be doing an election, I probably won't remember the penalty either. And there's no player aid to help you track that. So you just have to work on that yourself and try to pretend. So there's an alliance. I'm not seeing the treaty. Alright, we'll back away and see if we can figure out what the hell that means. Again, I've read these suckers, but you know me. I can't remember something from one day to the next. Okay, so the rules on treaties are under the German GE3 treaty rules. I assume they're actually matched with, like, the US 3 treaty, more or less. And we have these basic levels. So the first level, you can do a trade agreement, you can lend lease forces, and one of the most important things is you have a non-aggression pact when you have a treaty. Level 2, you can't declare war on each other at all. You can lend lease at a higher level. You can pay money for your ally to trigger treaty options. And I think there's a restriction now. Level 3 is the restricted one. You have to be in the same ideology, and it goes a little further where you can basically go, you fully cooperate. So that big thing there, that was the German action. Not quite completed yet. We still have one more step, at least. Okay, we roll the dice to see if the political affairs end phase. Okay, well, I'll roll some dice. Yeah, nothing seemed to happen. Let's look for the rolls on that. So unfortunately, they don't bother to give you any kind of, reference into the rules here. And in a game of this complexity, 30 pages, that's a sin. It might be worse. Let's see how Whiff handles this in the version I have. I know the 5th edition was pretty decent about it. But somewhere in here, probably after activating minors, there we go. We roll 2 dice. Subtract 1 for the result for each option played previously. If 4 to 7 major powers are at war, this would all be useful to have on a player aid somewhere. Okay. So let's re-roll. We subtract 1 for each option played previously, but not the current. This would have ended the turn because it's a 3 or less. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know I had to roll 2 dice. All right. That's the end of the political options section. So, that means we jump elsewhere. Bonus bid points. Everybody who didn't get an option this turn gets bonus bid points equal to their modified political effectiveness. Now, this is not necessarily a good thing, because if we look at the 0, you could take bid points equal to 3 times your political effectiveness, as opposed to just equal to your modified. So it's better to be up forward even if you don't want to do anything, because you can accumulate more bid points for next turn. So what we're going to see here is, Italy has a +3 bid for next turn. And a country like Japan is only going to get a +1 bid. But that's where we are. I'll record those on the little sheet of paper for, I don't know, next turn, I guess. I don't know. Mark the bids on this turn instead, just because although they affect next turn, I think it'll be easier for me to track that way. There's no advice one way or another what you really use this thing for. So now we're down to the weather phase, and really almost all of the remainder of the game turn we can just elude. The one exception is the productions phase. Now, the way production works, let's take ourselves a country. Well, since we've played with Germany before, let's look at Germany, and they made some changes. So right now, it looks to me like there are no German... we got 2 oil coming from Romania. These are hard to see. I think that's our only trade. Another resource up here coming from Sweden. So we got 3 extra resources. We also can look and see what we have in Germany, which looks like 5. Oh, I forgot some German troops there. Over in East Prussia. I generally use the tweezers with these counters. They're so slick that it's hard to get a grip on them, but I can't use them left-handed. Okay, so what were we at? We're at 2. Now, oil has special uses under an optional role, and I think we'll be playing with that. But I have 2 oil coming through neutral territories. I can also trace over the seas, which is why it's not important that I move the ships out. If I'm not at war with anyone, no one's going to interfere with me. That's one way to take the rolls. Another way is that people can interfere because it just says an enemy navy. Again, these terms aren't well defined, but my assumption is that in this era, you're not interdicting without some kind of political action that would have to be taken care of here. You can't just say, oh yeah, no, you're not getting this. In World in Flames, you're going to have to build convoy routes and run them across, but this abstracts those away. Okay, so where were we? 2, 3, 7, and I have the Rhineland. That puts me up to 10. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a total of my factory capability, but I do have 8 factories here. I have a multiplier of a half, which means my 8 factories only produce me 4 goods that I can use for anything. Now, I can record that right away here, and then I have the opportunity to spend on a one-for-one basis as to what I like. Now, this is all done simultaneously, I think. Let's make sure. Because otherwise, the Germans want to go last on it. Yeah. It's actually not even spelled out. It could be a purchasing system like you have in... Fine. Things keep hiding. I'm looking for it. Oh, it's got to be up here. There it is. Pax Britannica, where everybody's just buying shit at the same time, but they're aware of what the other person's doing, or it could be a secret simultaneous, or maybe it's something else that's not expressed by the rules at all. But either way, I have this money. Now, there is a particular interest for Germany to build boats. They currently are in the worst, in the second worst place out of the boat holding nations, I think. They and France. And there's this balance, you know, that you have to maintain if you're looking at that. So that rule is actually covered under the Naval Treaty, which is an operation, kind of like the other treaties. So each German boat bought gets me 5 more points. So I should be now balancing out and looking, you know, the French have 10, 15, 18, 20, looks like, I can't count, 47, 57, 65, and no boats over here. So they have 65 times 3 for their naval hold. And the Germans do have a navy. It looks like it's 27 times 5. Let's get another calculator so we can keep numbers up there. 27 times 5. So you can see it's going to take like a significant cost for me to surpass France's points. And I'm in the last position, so I have almost no chance of getting rid of this -1. France may have a chance. So I'm going to stock my money. I don't want to buy armies particularly. That doesn't help me. I'm not allowed to build factories or anything like that. So I'm in this position of getting too many resources for the factories I have. I need to upgrade my production multiple. The problem with that is that really makes... and I have a limitation here. I can only do this if it's 1937 or later, or if the CW or US is already up to that level. Which means I more or less probably will not be able to up my production multiple for quite some time. Building factories is always a possibility. But yeah, getting my production multiple up looks like it's going to be hard. So, I think, let's see, double all production is GE2. That's in here. Does it specifically call out what I think it should? It may not. Yeah, you can only do it if those countries are above your current production multiple. Now, the US is at 1/10, the Brits are at 1/2, and those are the two that I'm worried about. Neither of them's a real threat, So we're kind of forced to maintain this current situation unless we add factories. How do we mark added factories? God knows. We may be able to mark them using the resource marker backside, the extra. They've got a factory number on them, which is the same thing that I would have used here to cover this space if I was getting it. It's very much like these. Here's one. And then just keep that in another box and try to remember that, you know, I've got that total there. I'm going to figure out what everybody else's production is and come back in a bit. Interestingly here, England and France and the United States are the closest to being naval. France and England and the United States are the closest to falling into the failed treaty, failed naval powers. If France builds 2 more navies, they have more than England has. Now, I'm doing this in the open because it's the only way that makes sense to me. It means that there's not going to be a surprise mobilization, basically. So, you know, for $2, France could clear their little their problem over here as being the second worst naval power. Alternatively, they could join the naval treaty, but that takes an action and probably costs something. Look for it. It's not over there, I don't think. Maybe over on the other side. Yeah, this is really... There it is. So this would cost me 1 to start specifically validating that I'm in the naval treaty. This doesn't really help U.S. entry. What it does, this -7 here will say, hey, France, U.S. is unlikely to come in against France, which is pretty unlikely anyway. And then other people who successfully played a 0 option, which they wouldn't have to pay for, would get to sign it. But you can sign it all by yourself, and then it means that France would avoid that issue. But playing an action's a big deal, and the problem is, of course, if I start building a navy and England starts building a navy, then we're catching up to the U.S., and then the U.S. has to start building a navy. And really, Italy, I think, is the next one up, and they're pretty far away. They're a good 30 ships ahead of the French. So it's just going to be this competition among the Western democracies as to which one is going to be the loser, which... You know, maybe it's better to get the naval treaty out there instead and just leave Germany with a political effectiveness penalty. Or, I think I cheated here. I gave the bid mod instead of the effectiveness. Crap. Let's see. If you didn't get... We're going to go back to the roles we were in and try to see what happens if you didn't get one. Okay, that's not where I expected it, which was not in the sequence apply. Current modified political effectiveness, so I wrote the wrong values in there. So those bids are going to be different. So for example, Italy's would be 3 instead of 2. Japan's will be 1 instead of, I was giving them the bid mod that you get for your initiative position, which I don't know what the hell that matters. Prior turn's initiative position gives you a modifier to your next turn's bid, which is kind of sweet too. All right, so I got to fix those. But anyway, going back to this, I don't know if it really makes sense. You know, if France and Britain start getting into a bidding war over these, Britain's got more money. Do you really want to drain the two Western powers? So unless France gets a 1 on here, I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to get talked out of it. And they do not, so they're not going to pursue a naval escalation with the Brits. Basically, the Brits are pretty happy here. If the French can get off the naval treaty, they no longer have their penalty. So that'll work for them. And that's 1 full turn. I think we can try to squeeze in another turn on this video. Okay, so starting into this second turn, which is March, April, it's every 2 months in 36. We're at the point of bidding, and bidding's tough in a solo game, because the whole concept behind the bidding is basically you put one of these markers down to indicate how many of your money you're willing to risk. Now you have a bonus based on this, and what's this roll? That's the end of the turn stuff. So you have a bonus based on the modifiers of your last turn position, but if you failed to get something off at all, or a chance to get something off, you also have a modifier. And on top of that, there's the whole balance between, hey, how much money do I have? How much do I want to save up? There's no real gearing limits or anything like that in the Days of Decision system, which is different from World in Flames. And then I look and try to figure out, well, is there anything I terribly want to do even? So, you know, thinking about the Germans, well, I sure don't want to, create the Waffen-SS or most of the other national aligned things. I would love to double production, but as I said, I can't do that. Making an agreement to get more resources doesn't seem terribly valuable. So then we're kind of maybe looking over here at some of the more general things, like trying to get an alliance with a particular miner. There are just so many options, right? Or possibly the 0 options, where I can try to buy political effectiveness, which is going to be PE minus RM divided by PIP. Got no clue. Building a factory is definitely worthwhile, but it's expensive. And the G option, getting bid points equal to 3 times your PE, well, that just ensures that you kind of punt and take an action later on. Can I afford a factory? There's a good question. Germany only has $6. That would put me $6 in debt plus whatever I bid. I have a maximum debt of 20, which, means I can put one down. And it takes, 12 turns to show up? No, I think it just shows up right away. We would have to look that up in the specific rules for the 0. Takes 6 turns to arrive. They don't bother to tell you that on the chart. I mean, because right now our limitation is really, in terms of making money, is the number of factories we have. The problem with this is, though, later on, once we get up to 2 or 4, we're producing 16, and we have 8, 9, 10, 11. So even before we hit war footing, still allowed to be a piece and a 2, we've got too many factories for the resources we have. In the long run, it might work out okay. We might be able to, capture resources in Russia, for example. I mean, we look at France and that works out about even. But over in Russia, we could capture resources. There are resources in excess of the factories over in other areas. But that 2 times multiplier looks pretty stable until we go marching into here where there's, 16 resources, and we'd have to I don't know. I don't think we have to rebuild factories in this game. So we'd be getting factories at the same time. In fact, factories actually come to us more cheaply. Every 2 conquests, we get a factory. So I don't even know if it's worth kind of blowing the money on that. Our own thought on the naval aspect, we could build up our navy. It's great for sea lion, but I don't know how much it's going to help with other things. So I'm kind of tied up in this. I got no idea what to do. With no idea what to do, bidding 0 doesn't seem worth it, but bidding 1 does. Because that gets me these additional 4. I end up at 5. I could try to guesstimate what other people are bidding. But, I've got a chance of getting something off with a 0 bid anyway, where I'd be able to political effectiveness, RM5 per pip. I think that's going to cost me $5 per political effectiveness. It's only a chance, and every 5 points adds 1 to the die roll. Wow, that's maybe not terribly worthwhile either. I'm really having a hard time finding something. I don't particularly want trade agreements right now because my factories are overflowing. But I might be willing to look at minor alliances. I don't know what advantage there is. I mean, there's an advantage if there's a war situation, but it doesn't seem like war is going to break out until I'm ready to do it. So I don't really have to solidify those. Mainly, I might play the alliance game to try to, trigger some good points on here and try to draw people to me. And I'll look at the way you determine that. It's this treaty chart, which I haven't really looked at too much, but if I sign a treaty with, and let's look for someone, say, Italy, I could do a major power alliance. That's not a bad idea. That requires a response from them. But if I sign a treaty with Italy, it's going to affect Austria, Czechoslovakia. It's bad for Greece, and it's bad down here on the bottom end of things. Try to look for something that just, is nice. Like if I sign a treaty with Siam, Siam loves it. Well, that's not terribly useful to Germany. Europe tends to cause a lot more in the way of positive and negative effects. I'd like to see something like Turkey or Spain heading into my account. So, how likely am I to do that? Well, let's see. Let's see what the requirements of a treaty for Turkey or Spain are. The minor has less than 2 alliances in place. There seems to be a die roll involved in that. It's not fully explained here, but nor is it fully explained over here, I believe. IPO 3. So to make an alliance, I roll 2 dice. I add 1 for each economic agreement I have. So I could make an economic agreement with Spain or Turkey and give them resources, which I don't need right now, in exchange for factory production. That's an interesting concept. What is the cost for doing that? Well, economic agreement costs 4, alliance costs 5. Wow, these things cost a big pile of bucks. I'm going to just throw 1 in on my bid. Now, how am I going to mark that? Damned if I know. I'm going to replace this with a 1, and I'm going to put this 1 bid over here. Now, technically, there are actually 2 bid markers you can place. If you want to do more than 1 action, you place 1 bid marker for the amount of points that you're spending on your bid. And you have to spend at least 1. You can't just count on these freebies to do you anything, including the last turn freebies. You have to spend an actual point to get an action. But if I spend 1 on the bid, and then I also put another marker down, or I spend whatever on the bid, and I put another marker down, and the positioning left-right is important for this, but I'll probably use, a factory marker or whatever as the multiplier. The other marker is how many different actions you're trying to do. Now, your total points gets divided by the number of actions you try to do. It's assumed to be 1. But if you put 2 markers down, you could be trying to get a lot of activity at once. It means that you're much, much less likely to get it off, though, because a 1 bid is getting me 5 here in terms of positioning, whereas, if I was trying to do 2 actions, I would only be in the 2 place in positioning, or 3 maybe. I think everything's always rounded up. But yeah, that definitely a big difference in terms of how likely I am to trigger something off. I gotta kind of zone out on the charts and figure out if anybody's got any big reason that they want to trigger more than 1. Otherwise, everybody's probably going to put a point in, which is really, really predictable. And if you were actually playing this, you would probably be saying, wait a minute. So Germany, if they put 1 in, I get a 5. If I put 1 in, I only get 4, but that makes it 5, 6. Yeah, that sounds good. But on the other hand, it's money that you're spending, and you may get the activity anyway. The only time you're guaranteed the activity is if you're the first player. Otherwise, you might roll that 3 or whatever. I've selected my bids, and I'm beginning to see, geez, there's a problem with actually recording them. So most people selected 1s. Japan, Russia, and the US all have things that can increase their political effectiveness. So they actually selected slightly higher prices. In each case, they paid 3. China is not paying anything. So they will not be in the bidding, and they'll be at the bottom of the track without any chance of doing an action. I didn't see anything they really want to get. And they get $1 a turn right now, which is probably rather optimistic. Simulation-wise, but they have an interesting option, which I can't figure out the point that they'd want to do it. The Chinese Civil War, I guess, to allow the Russians to build Chinese communist units, but they're at war and they end up able to fight each other, and it does hand off, though, some of the difficulty in managing China to being able to produce units with Russian funds as well as Chinese communists, as well as the Chinese nationalists. But at this point, I don't really feel like either way I'm going to have much of an army, and I certainly don't want to create a monstrous pro-communist faction in North China and have that, knock the nationalists out completely, which is my fear by doing this. It seems like these are in the wrong place in a sense. The communists have a warlord abducts Chiang, which, this was a historical situation, but it helped convince Chiang Kai-shek to stop the anti-communist crusade and to actually cooperate with them. And while that might seem like a great idea in some ways, it also looks to me like I'm not sure that nationalist China would survive the communists in play now. The U.S. could, of course, work out a treaty and start sending Lend-Lease over to the nationalists, and they probably want to. The U.S. is considering a neutrality pact. But anyway, our points here, so we get 1, 5, and that's all I get to, right? 5 for the Germans. But I've got to have numbers for everyone here. So, you know, I mean, I can try to remember. Germans have 5, Brits have 4, 5, 6, okay. But now I need more dice, right? French have 4, 5, and I'm just having a hard time finding. I guess if I pull out some more dice, I can do this. So our ordering shifts things upward. The Brits will move up into the first position with their 6 bid. I've already paid the money off the chart. Their 6 bid gives them first position. Next 6 bid is Japan, and they'll also be up there. And then Russia also has a 6. And ties are resolved by the prior order. So we'll try to move these down and this up and that in place. And then I think everybody else who's involved in the bidding, except Italy, has only a 4. Everybody else is going to have a 5. So we'll arrange. Looks like Germany gets in there. And it's just a mess to do this kind of thing. France's 5 holds, and then the U.S. 5 will go into place up there with the Italy in the 4 position. The democracies actually have the ability to drop their position 1 level. The reason you'd want to do this is reactive capability. So if Britain doesn't have anything terribly important it wants to do, but it has something that could block a big Japanese move, or more accurately, one of the German moves. So Germany, if they're demanding Czechoslovakia, well, the Brits have the option to make a certain play under that circumstance. And let's see, let's take a look. Poland, Czechoslovakia, the German invasions. So let's find those. Whoa, they don't go there? What? Okay, so demand Danzig corridor. If Commonwealth option 7, back Poland, is not played in the same turn, the Danzig corridor becomes controlled by Germany as part of your home nation. So you'd have to know what the Germans are doing. And if you're ahead of the Germans in terms of initiative, you're off doing your own thing. You're probably not going to pick that option. Now, there's a secret selection option as one of the possibilities for the game, and this was actually, I think, the standard rule in the old days of Decision. That causes nothing but problems. It means you have to guess when the Germans are going to go in. That might work better in a game with 1 turn per year. 12 turns per year, I cannot see allowing that option. You really kind of, as it is, being high in the initiative is a possible problem. Although the Germans may have restrictions as to when they can do this. No. Just production multiple, which we have to get up to make any territorial demands in Europe. So I don't know what the British want to do with their action. I'll look for something. So the English have the first action, and I'm going to, I believe, play my 0 effect to try to increase my political effectiveness. I'm going to spend 15 bucks on this. This is a lot. That puts me to -2. The counter's flipped now. Try to remember that. And I get 1 die at +3. On a 4, 5, or 6, my effectiveness goes up. And we succeed. So that's pretty cool for an effect for the turn. That used up my entire action. Now, I do get to trigger something. Is there anything that's pissed at the Germans that can move? Austria, Hungary. I think Czechoslovakia is in favor of the Germans. The problem is, if we look at these, Austria over here would have to pay at least 2 to move, so I'd be losing markers by doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger Czechoslovakia, which should be somewhere safe. It's over here. That can move one towards the Germans. Well, it's in its ideology, so it would cost 3 or 2 to move. So I'm basically just spending the Czech, the advantage that the Germans had with the Czechs, just blowing it aside by this. And that moves that down. Now I have to consider what I want to do with the Japanese. Before I do that, I have to roll this sucker. I don't remember what my modifiers are, and I don't want to walk all the way over there, so we'll look for it in the rolls. Subtract 1 from the result for each option played previously. That's none. And then effects based on people at war. So I need less than or equal to 3 to end it here. Oh, jeez. You know, these dice feel really questionable, but I'm not even sure they're the same ones because I've got more reds in there. Wow. Okay, well, that's end of turn. Japanese were going to try to put Tojo in place, but they fail. So now everybody gets points equal to their political effectiveness as their next bid. Whatever they spend on bids this time, it's wasted. And after allocating our choices here and getting the cash, everybody's got a little bit of money. The Chinese have a couple bucks, actually. The English are back positive. They don't make a whole hell of a lot here. I got 5, 6... make it 3, you know, at their multiplier, as opposed to the Germans who are pulling in 4. French are at 3 as well. Italians are weak. And nobody's got a huge ton, though. The big nations in terms of production are the U.S. and the Soviets, and they're both at 1/10, so they're pulling in 2 each. The Chinese aren't tiny, but they're only pulling in 1 a turn. So, you know, you can't complain too much about what you've got right now, but it does suck that nothing much happened. Now, if that doesn't turn around at some point, it's going to start causing problems because we're not going to be able to do all the things we're supposed to do. But it's okay for any given turn to be that kind of problem, just because this isn't like the original days of Decision where you have, you know, really one chance to do something each year. So yeah, you're talking, I think in the original it was 36 to 39. You don't get a lot of actions in there, if I recall it correctly. That seems extreme. Maybe there were more actions than I'm thinking. Maybe there were more turns than I'm giving it credit for. I seem to remember there were 1-year turns, a la Origins of World War II. But maybe I'm mistaken, but you did have to make a roll to get your action off in that, and here instead the roll is the continuation of the turn. So if you invest heavily, you can pretty much guarantee your action, or actions as the case may be. We're not seeing much happening right now, though. Out of everything that we've seen, I think the Brits have done... Well, the Germans got the Rhineland, and the Brits did some kind of social program or something and improved the effectiveness of their government.